The end of an era is upon us. This week marks the end of Dave Cote's tenure as CEO of Honeywell, the huge diversified industrial that makes everything from aerospace components, climate control systems, security equipment, specialty materials, turbochargers, and refining catalysts. Cote took over 15 years ago, and under his leadership, this stock has risen more than 380%. That dramatically outperforms the broader averages. Sure, he's left the company in very good shape for successor, Darius Adamczyk, the current president and chief operating officer. But tonight, we want to take a look back and review all the ways in which Cote's leadership has transformed this company for the better. So let's check in with Dave Cote, the fabulous outgoing CEO and chairman of Honeywell, get a better sense of everything he's done and where he's going and how his company's doing. Dave, welcome back to Mad Money. How are you?
Jimmy, always nice to see you. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, look, I'm going to give you the floor. You've done such a great job for all the viewers. I want to ask you if you could give me 3 reasons why you think the company dramatically outperformed under you and your leadership style. Maybe people at home can understand how they could be Dave Cote, too.
Well, I hope it doesn't come across like too much bragging, because we're actually pretty proud of everything we did. And as you recall, we started with something that most people thought was a lot of trouble. And I could promise you, as bad as it might have looked externally, it was even worse internally. So it was all true. So why did it do so much better? I really think that we kept the focus early on both the short term and the long term, and saying, how do we manage to do both? We also, I thought, did a pretty good job of recognizing where we were and not wishing for something else. Instead, actually scrubbed it down to say, what were our issues? Where were we? What were the legacy problems? And started to address it. And I'd say, thirdly, we developed our business model, and we really stuck with it. And it was a business model focused on 3 parts. One was having a portfolio that we could grow with. The second was a constant focus on process improvement. And the third was actually building a culture that put the customer first, thought about short and long term, recognized that things weren't always easy to do, and that constantly evolved. And I really think that culture ends up being important.
Well, let's go into the not easy to do issue. You got through the Great Recession better than any industrial I follow. You took dramatic action. I am sure most people said you should do nothing or hunker down. That's what I always heard from people. That was not your approach.
No, actually, thank you for saying that, because we really tried to be a lot more creative about it than that. And we took a vision right from the beginning that said, okay, this really sucks. It just does. And that's why they call it a recession and they don't call it a party. So we're all going to work harder than we ever did before, and it's going to seem very unrewarding. But that being said, looking at the long term again, these things do end. And we need to make sure that we keep that in mind. At the same time, we focus on how do we manage our way through this. So we said we got 3 constituencies, customers, employees, and investors. And we said customers have to come first, because if we don't do a good job there, there'll be nothing for employees and investors. And then we looked at how do we manage both employees and investors in a way that benefited both the short term as best we could, but managed the long term. And when it came to the short term, that's why we came up with our policy on furloughs instead of doing all these massive layoffs. It's still painful for people, but it's a lot less painful when you start coming out and they all have jobs and you've preserved your industrial base. We started working with suppliers early on, and I can remember getting my whole staff together at one point where we said we're confronting some difficult decisions, and people didn't want to do it. I broke them up into 3 groups and said, okay, here's the situation we're confronting. We need to make the decision. I know none of you want to do this, but you need to know I'm going to take a 0 bonus going into this, and we need to look at this alternative. I broke them up into 3 groups. All 3 groups came back saying, not only do we agree and we're going to proceed with the action you suggested, but each of us are voluntarily taking a 0 bonus so that we're all in this together. And that really does a lot to build a culture and build a company, I think.
All right. Now, I've got to ask you about current day, the things you're passionate about. I know you're passionate about the Patriots. You're passionate about leadership in your team. But you've been passionate about the debt. This is the issue that you've come out about. You've got a president that wants to cut taxes, which would be great for Honeywell. But you also are passionate about the idea that our grandchildren will be in hock because of what's going on now. Are you going to get involved in fixing that problem after you leave?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define getting involved. Certainly, I've been weighing in and providing my opinion wherever anybody wants it or wherever I can. Because you said it absolutely correctly. Some people want to point to the Reagan years and say, yeah, see, there was great growth that came from the deficit spending that occurred there. Well, that was true, but we had 25% debt to GDP. Now we're at between 75 and 80, and it's going to go up with the demographics we have. So I'm a little reluctant to say we ought to cut taxes. We certainly ought to come up with a better system than we have. And you've heard me talk about this in the past with repatriation and how high our rates are and what we ought to do to bring rates down. But that ought to all be done in a way that I think is revenue neutral. We need to do that, and we need to address entitlements. Those problems are still coming, and that's not going to go away.
One thing, I've always known you're my next-door neighbor until recently when you sold your house, and I've always known you as a passionate, good guy. But you did take a swipe at United Technologies right near the end. You tried to buy them. Do you regret that? Because that did not go well. That was not a Dave Cote move.
Well, here's how I looked at it, and here's the discussion I had with the board at the time. As I said, this is a chance to buy a bunch of, okay, I'll be a bit unkind, but mismanaged assets that we can do something with. And the only downside, if this thing ever goes awry, is a little bit of embarrassment. And if I have to trade off some embarrassment for the potential to make a lot of money for our share owners and the UTX share owners, I'm willing to take that gamble. So, okay, it didn't work out. You could argue we're a little bit embarrassed, but, you know, I hardly call it a blemish. There's a bunch of things you try that work, some that don't, and all right, that one didn't.
Well, judging by your performance, which is the best of any industrial that I follow, obviously it went very well. Dave Cote, congratulations for all of the good years you had, and thank you for all the money you made viewers over the years. Great to see you, sir.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Okay. What can I say? It's one of the best. Mad Money's back in. Booyah! Jim Cramer here from Mad Money. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube. Click here to subscribe and get the jump on my exclusives with CEOs, plus market news, investing advice, and a whole lot more.